Professor Piergiorgio Mori, you have done very interesting research and have written a book about a certain period in Italian literature, the end of the 1950s and the beginnings of the 1960s, in which you mainly talk about the relationship between literature and the boom, the economic boom. Why were you interested in that in the first place?
I think that in that period it was a dramatic change, in Italy's life. Maybe Italy was not too far from other countries like the other southern countries, and nowadays it is considered one of the most industrialized countries in the world. It was just because of that period. So it was not only changing the society, but also it was the cultural life, the Italians' habits. There was, like Pasolini said, una mutazione antropologica, a changement of the mentality of Italian. It was good, according to someone was good, according to someone else was bad. Anyway, it was something to consider also from a literary point of view. And the literary point of view was thanking these ideas of Elio Vittorini that through this magazine, Menabo, precisely, Menabo 4, it started, a new discussion, a new topic to consider.
Vittorini was the author of an important text at that point, which was called Letteratura e Industria.
Yes, it was the manifesto of this period. It was pushing to reflect upon, that the industrial world had changed every art, but maybe literature. He said, for instance, we had in a picture, in a history of art, there was a dramatic change with Picasso, and also in the music with the dodecaphonic music, because the society was changing. And for instance, our poetry, our literature is still strongly linked to the agriculture world, to countryside.
That was the case at that point.
Yes, that point. So he wanted to say, how can reflect the changement of the industrial life in literature? We have to change our way to think about literature, to write, etc.
But generally, the economists would say that that was a positive period. It led to development and so on and so forth. But on the other side, I think these authors were interested in the cost, the dark costs of such a change.
Dark cost.
What did you notice about that?
Yes, they were strongly, especially in Italy, they were strongly shocked with the changement, because at first there was a very incredible effect about the distribution of Italian population. You have to think that 10 million of Italian people moved from the south to the north, and that's
because they could only find work.
Yes, there was an agrarian reform in the 50s, but was completely useless, because the people that had to work in the field were attracted by the factories of the north, and so they moved to Milan, to Turin, etc. And that changed, changed them, but maybe changed also, these towns, because Turin's of nowadays it is not Turin. So 15 years ago, people changed. People are more open, for instance, in the north too. So it is very, very, very interesting, but there was a cost. A cost was that Italy became richer and richer, but someone, was left behind, and this layer of the population were working. The people that worked for this, they weren't considered at all. and it created a strong rage, that exploded in the decade.
That was to follow.
Decade in the 70s, with the terrorism, etc., etc. And nowadays we have, in fact, there was an interesting book by Kreins, Guido Kreins, that it is a great opportunity that was failed from Italy. It is the boom, the economical boom. So they had advertisements, shorts, and consumism, and cars.
We mainly know these changes by what we know about the history of Italian cinema, like the mutation from neorealismo to the cinema of Fellini and Antonioni of the 60s, in which you see the new architecture, the cars that you say, and the new style of life. But what's interesting in the literature, you say, and especially in what you call il romanzo industriale, is that the main authors were workers, white-collar workers, like Otieri or Volponi.
The problem was the contradiction, inside them, even inside them, that, I'm criticizing capitalism, but I'm taking advantage from it, because, they were bourgeois. Otieri was from an aristocratic family. Maybe it was different for Volponi, but Paolo Volponi was an interesting figure of this period, because he was a strong critic of this period of capitalism, and he ended his life as a politician in the Partito di Rifondazione Comunista, but he was always working in a high position as a manager in important factories. He had a problem when he said in an interview that he was going to vote for a Communist Party. So he was president of Fondazione Agnelli, but Giovanni Agnelli told him that they couldn't permit, an important manager that said voting communist. So he left. He was he worked as an intellectual for some years. Then he devoted himself to the political engagement and work. But he wrote interesting books, because he started with Memoriale, that is the alienation of a worker. Probably it was a true story that he had known, that he had lived with people who were treated very well. But despite this, there was some situation of some workers that couldn't accept this. It was for them like a nightmare, to be in this factory and to be losing themselves. And so this operaio, this Albino, is named Albino Saluggia, loses his mind, and he became alienato. This is the theme.
The same kind of novel was written by Otieri in Donnarumma all'assalto.
Exactly. That was another problem. There are a double problem, because the first problem was the life in a factory. The second one was that the factory was planted in the south of Italy, that was without factories. So it was seen as a horizon of hope for many people, for many people that try in this situation to get into, to be taken over by the factory. And Otieri was the man in the human resource department that had to choose who had to take over. It is very, very difficult choice for him, for the alter ego, the alter ego
in the novel.
In the novel, and in fact, Otieri left. It was the last novel about this situation. He had a strong breakdown, because it was really, really difficult for him, And especially there was the contrast from between the people, of the South and the factory. It was like like the factory could be associated only with the fog, with the north atmosphere, northern atmosphere, but not with the sun, with the warm, of the warm atmosphere of Napoli and the beauty, etc. So
was this like in Michelangelo Antonioni's movie Il Deserto Rosso, where industry is present and the fog, the atmosphere, the poison?
Yes, it is like Otieri always says, also in other books that he wrote before than Donnarumma l'Assalto, he said it is strange because it is like we can't associate, we are not able to associate factories to sun, to warmth. It is we only can associate the factory's life with the fog, with the gray atmosphere. The gray atmosphere, yes.
Professor Mori, was this kind of literature at that point popular, or at least well received by critics?
It was well received by the critics. It didn't become, popular in the sense that they were not bestseller, like bestseller, but it was rediscovered, and reconsidered, especially later, because they were really interesting. Maybe the only one that was really well considered, also from readers, was Italo Calvino. That wrote not really about the factory's life, but about the miracolo economico. And there are some short stories like Una nuvola di smog, La speculazione edilizia, that is talking about the dramatic changement of the landscape and the wild construction of houses, for instance, in Riviera Ligure in Sanremo. He was from there. And it is a short story, but that can give you the atmosphere of that period,
Would you say that at times like those times when politicians and economists would celebrate what's happening, literature, by pointing out such problems, in a way was already diagnosing the problems, even the social and political problems that were about to come? You talked about the 70s. In a way, literature already pointed out the exploitation and the alienation that would lead to the very violent 70s in Italian culture.
I think the first voice that was really, almost sarcastic. There were some pages that were really interesting, where those ones that were written by Bianciardi, La Vita Agra, that is a sort of, we say, controcanto to the Dolce Vita. Vita Agra means harsh life, instead of sweet life, that Dolce Vita,
yes.
The Fellini movie. And he says that we have it is just quantity, this life that they are giving us. We are faster, we are richer, but we are losing our soul. And it is very, very interesting because it is the story of an anarchist that arrives to Milan because he has to put a bomb at the Montecatini. And it is linked to another book he had written about a slaughter that happened in a mine in 1953, Ribolla. And he arrived in Milan. He has to do this, to put this bomb. But it doesn't do that. But he can write, he can say about all Milano, that all the people going fast, all the people without soul, and people start to become indifferent. And that is the bomb. It's very interesting because it was a bomb to put the word end to this period, maybe. And just 15 years ago, in the 12th of December 1969, was put a bomb at the Bank of Agricoltura in Milan, at Piazza Fontana, that it started the season of terrorism in Italy, and it was the end, according to someone. We can say that it's true, the end of innocence, the age of innocence, because it started like this, the new decade that was underlined from terrorism, slaughters, two kinds of terrorism in Italy. There were terrorism marked by fascist
tendencies, yeah.
Brand that was tending to hit in the hip, means, you know, with the slaughters in like Piazza Fontana, with the laymen. The victims were laymen, men of the road, like in a train, like the station of Bologna in the 1980s. And the authors of these crimes were never really recognized. Maybe there were some connection with secret services, Italian secret services. The other side was a terrorism whose brand was communist, like Brigate Rosse, was against a precise objective, you know, like industrial men, managers, judges, and politicians like Aldo Moro.
In a way, after that, economy changed again, and you say that in the 90s, literature and industry went separate ways. Yeah. But you also use another expression, romanzo aziendale.
Yes.
Do you think that this kind of novel and this interest for literature
in the 80s,
re-emerged nowadays? Because we have corporations and work has changed, but it's still there.
Yes, in the 80s, Italy changed again because there was a sort of new boom, but it was a boom whose dictate was provoked by finance. It was not true. It was not true.
It was more of a bubble.
Exactly, and it is interesting because it started another myth, the myth of Yuppie, the people that was, so it was not based upon it was not material, okay? And so it was going to change also, again, the word of job, of working. And now there are another stripe, we can say, of writers. They started maybe with Antonio Pennacchi, who wrote Mammut in 1994. Mammut, like the classic, he was working for a trade union trade, the Italian union trade. He was a worker. And he wrote this book. It was also funny, it's very ironic. And he said that we are like Mammut, we are going to be extinguished, we working class.
As a species.
Yeah. Yes, but also it started a new generation writing about the romanzo aziendale. It's called like this because azienda means not only factory, but also the system, new capitalism, the terziario, famous terziario. It is the third point, of economy, and Italy is quite strong in that. But it was going to exploit in another way, especially in another way, the worker, and the problem, the great problem for the young generation is the precariato. It means that it's very difficult to, especially for Italy, it's very hard because we have the myth of posto fisso, a steady job, that job for all your life. And it is going to change because we have not the same mentality of an Anglo-Saxon world, with an Anglo-Saxon world with the opportunity to change every 2-3 years, work and reinvent yourself. You know, it's very hard for us.
Professor Mori, we don't have much time left, but do you think that this relationship between literature and the different forms of work is still important nowadays?
Yes, of course, because there's the opportunity to have this relation with the reality, especially for people who are 30s, in the 30s, in the 40s, and they haven't, still now they don't have, the opportunity. They haven't had a job in their life. They have just having had, some
work here,
some work
there.
here, some work there, but they can't settle down. They can't have a family. So it's a very, very dramatic, and it's very interesting now that there is this ability of the storytellers, we can call them like this, to underline this changement, to especially this changement, historical changement that sometimes literatures can describe much better than historians, So it's very, very interesting to
much better than historians. Why do you think that is?
Because while I think that there's also, it's not like, diagnosis, but there's also some part of your soul and your heart in literature. So it is not just gathering dates, numbers, statistics. It is also something that involves the private story of a man. It's not like anonymous, like can be, a page from a historian book, but this is the life of every day. So through, for instance, what happens in a smaller portion of an area in Piombino or in Napoli, we can see, I was talking about these two cities because there are two interesting books. One is Acciaio, Steel, that was written by Silvia Vallone, and it is just the background. There's the story of the end of another important factory, Lucchini, that is doing Acciaio. There was a strong connection between the city and the factory once. Now there is not anymore. The identity is going to be lost from some cities, like Taranto.
Professor Mori, thank you very much for this research and this diagnosis into literature, but also into our history and the urgency of our present.
Thank you, Mr. Professor, and thank you very much, Horea, for having invited me. Thank you very much.